Christmas Stories from Grandma's Attic by Arleta Richardson. Illustrated by Kulin-Sandel. Chapter 10. Field Day. Mabel tells of a Christmas adventure with her 4-year-old granddaughter, Arleta. The Christmas of 1927 was very different indeed from any I had ever known. Aside from the fact that it was the first time Sarah Jane and I had not been together for at least part of the day, Chicago was not at all like North Branch. The big city was the last place I ever expected to be, but in November a letter had arrived from Alma. "Mama, do you think you could come and stay with us? Harry and I are both so busy that we haven't had the time to spend with Arleta. The housekeeper Emma is very good to her, but now that Arleta is 4, she should have more personal attention. What she really needs is a grandma." So the week before Christmas found me looking out over Lake Michigan from the big apartment window. "I'm glad to have water out here," I said to Alma. "It reminds me of my Chippewa River, even if I can't see across it." "You can hardly even see it this morning," she said. "The sky and the lake are the same color." She looked over my shoulder at the snow coming down. "You aren't going to try to go out today, are you? It's going to be awfully windy and cold." "I grew up with more snow and cold than this, Alma, and so did you," I told her. I couldn't disappoint Arleta. She's looking forward to seeing the decorations downtown. "You've never gone around town by yourself, Mama. I'd worry about you finding your way alone." I assured her that we could stay in one place until they came to pick us up. "After all, how could we possibly get lost in Marshall Fields?" I said. Then I laughed. "What's so funny, Mama?" For a moment, I thought I heard Sarah Jane saying, "Be careful, Mabel. You're tempting fate. We learn never to say what could possibly happen." It was decided that Arleta and I would go directly to the big department store, and Harry would come to get us in the afternoon. Alma wrapped her fur coat around her and pulled on her gloves. "If you're sure you'll be all right then, have a nice time. Let Emma call a cab for you, and Harry will pick you up at 3 o'clock, and for goodness sake, don't carry packages. Have them sent out. Let someone do something for you for a change." She started for the door but then turned around again. "Are you sure you don't want Emma to go with you?" "Of course not. She has her work to do. Now go, and don't worry about us." I'll admit that I would have appreciated a familiar face when the cab driver set us down at the entrance to Marshall Fields. A 4-year-old is a lot of fun, but not much help in a crisis. "Now, don't let go of Grandma's hand," I warned her. "If you get lost in all this mob, I'll never find you again." Cars whizzed by and elevated trains clattered overhead. People were clutching their coats to keep from having them whipped off in the wind. I had to use both my hands to open my purse and pay the driver, and in that instant Arleta was gone. I must have looked pretty frantic because the driver quickly reassured me. "Don't worry, ma'am. She isn't going far." He pointed at the big store window where Arleta stood with her nose pressed against the glass.
"Oh, Grandma, look! Here's Santa and all the elves!"
Arleta squealed. I was as fascinated by the scene as she was. Santa nodded his head as he watched small hammers pounding, needle and thread going in and out, toy dogs barking, and dolls dancing. Little boy and girl mannequins skated around on a pond of ice. It was too much to absorb all at once. Finally, I said, "We'd better go inside. It's getting colder. We'll look again when we come out to wait for your father." Arleta pushed into a space with me in the revolving door.
"I don't like this," she said. "I'm afraid it won't let me out."
I didn't admit that I wasn't comfortable with it either, but I was glad that the doorman held the door for us when we got inside. The warm air felt good after the icy blast outdoors. We stopped to look around with awe at the gorgeous decorations all over the store. The big tree that stood in the center of the floor sparkled with silver and lights, and was decorated with balls that glittered and shone. My mind went back to a very different tree that once stood in a little country schoolhouse.
"Oh, look, Ma, isn't it beautiful? Our grade made the paper chains to put on it. Roy's grade did the popcorn balls. Did you ever see a prettier tree?"
A tug on my sleeve reminded me that Arleta was anxious to start her shopping.
"First, a present for Emma," she said. "Something red. That's her favorite color."
After some discussion, we selected a scarf and gloves, and Arleta took the money from her little purse to pay for them.
Now we get to see the money fly,
she informed me. We watched the clerk put the bill into a little cylindrical case, which she placed in a wire basket.
There it goes.
The basket whizzed up to a room above the main floor where the change was put in the case and sent back to our clerk. Now that we had seen this wonder performed, it was time to visit Santa. "Toyland is on the 3rd floor, ma'am," the floor walker directed. He pointed the way to the escalator and elevator. Arleta looked at me anxiously.
Do you want to go up the elevator, Grandma? I think I prefer the elevator,
I replied, and by the relieved look on her face, I knew I'd chosen wisely. It took some persuasion to get Arleta on the back of the pony to have her picture taken with Santa.
He's not going to run away with you,
I assured her. I used to ride ponies like this, and they are very gentle. She consented to being lifted up, but I could tell that she would be glad when she was safely on the floor again. As I watched Santa talking to the apprehensive little girl, I could hear another voice from the past. "Have you been a good girl this year?" I nodded, hoping that Santa Claus hadn't heard about the times I'd been something less than perfect. "Then there must be a package here for you." I waited breathlessly while a gift was placed into my hands. No matter that Roy said Mob bought the gift, it came from Santa. We looked at all the toys in the department, and what a wonderland it was. I could never have imagined having all these things to play with. We lingered the longest at the display of dolls.
There's the one Santa will bring me.
Arleta pointed to a beautiful doll with long curls, real eyelashes, and eyes that moved.
I'm going to call her Rosemary. Isn't that a pretty name?
I nodded, but I was back in our old kitchen. An old rag doll, stuffed with popcorn, lay on the back of the stove to dry out.
I'm going to name her Charlotte, Ma. Don't you think that's a pretty name?
Did it matter whether it was Rosemary, with the $25 price tag, or Charlotte, rescued from a mud puddle, as long as the small mother loved it?
I'm hungry, Grandma. All right, let's go wash up for lunch.
The ladies' lounge with the gleaming white tile was decorated for Christmas, too. A small tree stood in the corner and colored lights surrounded the mirrors. I chuckled to myself as I searched in my bag for a nickel. Imagine paying to open the bathroom door. I'm surprised one of my brothers didn't think of that, if for no other reason than to torment his little sister. It felt good to sit down in the tea room. I realized that I was getting hungry, too.
I want a peanut butter sandwich,
Arleta announced. I scanned the menu.
I don't see any peanut butter here. Wouldn't a nice chicken salad taste good?
The additional promise of ice cream for dessert brought a reluctant agreement, and we settled back to eating lunch.
Will we finish shopping after we eat, Grandma?
Yes, I replied.
I need to find something nice for your mother and Daddy. And for you, Grandma, something for you. You'll have to turn around while I buy it, so it will be a surprise.
By the time we had finished our shopping, I was thankful that Alma had insisted that I have the packages sent home. When it was almost 3 o'clock, we started back to the door to wait for Harry.
Grandma,
Arleta reminded me,
you said we could go see the window again when we came back out. Can we go look until Daddy comes?
I had promised all right, so we went out the big doors onto the cold, windy street. It was still noisy and windy and cold, but as far as I could see, that was all that was the same. There was no Toyland in the window, no mannequins skating, no Santa ho-ho-hoing.
Grandma, this isn't the window we saw before.
I see that, I said.
What happened to it?
Arleta asked. I'm sure it was right where it was this morning, I told her. We are the ones who are in the wrong place. We'd better go back in and find out where we are. The doorman was most helpful. Yes, ma'am, there is an entrance on Madison. You are at the State Street entrance. He pointed us in the right direction, and I hurried off across the store. By now, it was past 3 o'clock, and I was afraid we had missed Harry.
Daddy will find us,
Arleta assured me.
We can look at the toy window while we wait.
Looking up and down the busy street, I wasn't too sure about that. The cab had let us off at the store, but how did I know which was considered the front entrance? Somewhere I've heard that if you stand in one place long enough, everyone you've ever known will pass by. When 4 o'clock came and went, I had seen hundreds of people, none of whom had gone by before, as far as I could tell. We'd gone around in the revolving door so often that the doorman seemed like an old friend. Finally, he had a suggestion. "Madam, let me get a cab for you. Go on back home. Your son-in-law will check for you there, I'm sure." This seemed like a sensible solution. It was after dark when we arrived back at the apartment and Alma was pacing the floor.
"Mama, where on earth have you been? Did you get lost?"
"Of course not," I said.
"I knew right where we were. I just wasn't sure where Harry was."
Alma helped me out of my coat and boots, and Emma took Arleta off to be fed and put to bed. "Harry came home at 3:30. He waited at the entrance for 20 minutes, then decided you'd gotten tired and taken a cab home. When he didn't find you here, he went right back to look for you. He called every 15 minutes to see if I'd heard from you."
"Oh my, what a bother,"
I said. "I just didn't know that the store had 2 front doors. We were standing at one of them while Harry was at the other." Alma and Harry were so relieved to have us home safely that neither one of them thought to ask me why I hadn't called home. So I didn't tell them that I'd never used a telephone that didn't have an operator to talk to. As I wrote a letter to Sarah Jane that evening, I thought of the many holidays we had spent together over the years.
"I suppose I would get used to all this if I lived in the city long enough, but I believe North Branch is more to my liking. I know I shall miss you and Thomas on Christmas Day. Give my love to your family and rest assured that the big city has not changed your old friend. My heart is still in the country, and I suspect always will be."
End of Field Day.